we are trying to do today is our map would be that we would be focusing upon what is theory, then moving towards how theory becomes applicable, and then move towards are theories proving to be a problem in literature. So this is how we would be dealing with in this talk that we have. Okay, so this is how we would be moving forward. So first of all, we need to debunk, if I can call it a myth, is that there is a lot of difference between theory and literary theory. Okay, so what we nowadays understand theory, a literary theory, is actually theory related to social sciences and not literary theory. It is applied to literature as now literature has become a part of existing humanities and social sciences. So that is how we deal with different world theories, put them into literature and try to figure out things written in literature through a particular theory and name them as literary theory. Okay, so this is the premise that we first of all need to talk about. Okay, so what is theory now? So forget literary theory for some time. What is theory? And then we will shift towards what is literary theory. Theory is for the understanding of literature. Okay, it is very simple. When you need a better understanding of what is written, you go to a theory and then we term them as literary theory. So this is the basic premise of any theory. Okay, but the problem with theory getting applied to literature is that it is not applied theory. Theory in itself is a discipline. Theory ની તમે જ્યારે વાત કરો છો તો પોતે જ એક discipline થઈ જાય છે. Okay, but without a prefix of literary. Okay, so for example, if you read Lacan or if you read Foucault or if you read Derrida or if you read Kristeva, they are not literary theorists. They are theorists. Okay, so they were never concerned with how they were be applying their theories to literature. So that was not the case. They wrote a theory on the basis of their understanding about world, and therefore it is known as world theory and not literary theory. They have very conveniently robbed theories into literature and termed them as literary theory. What we are discussing today is my understanding of what we think literary theory is. So you can also deny, but we should first of all have a close look at what theory is. Okay, so what is theory again? It is a common stock of ideas applicable to general humanities. A word important है, general humanities, not literature. Therefore, theory is a common stock of ideas applicable to general humanities. That means interpretation. So you are interpreting ideas. Okay, so anything that is written, you apply something in order to understand it. Okay, but the modern theory is post Second World War or let us say post 1950s, to be more specific about it, against humanism, because modernism was a race against the basic tenets of humanism. Okay, so what do we have in humanism now? In humanism, we have essentialism, universalism, and naturalism. Now, all three characteristics mean that we earlier were taking everything for granted. So, what is. Okay, so that is how you understand it. Whatever is. You don't question what is. Okay, you only interpret what is without questioning the existence of it. Okay, so that was the role of literary theory. Okay, earlier when you talk about Aristotle, or you start with Plato and then Aristotle and then Sidney, up till T.S. Eliot, up till 1920s, they wrote about literature, whereas the modern theories don't write about literature. they write about what is happening in the world, and then you try to analyze what is happening in literature through the binoculars of what is happening in the world. So I hope I'm making myself clear through this. Okay? As we discussed in humanism, there were three things. First of all, it was essentialism, there was universalism, there was naturalism. So everything that we have was for granted. Now, what does theory do, the modern theory do? So now when I speak theory, you should understand modern theory, that is post-1950s. Okay? Nothing should be taken for granted. That is what modern theorists say. Okay? So everything has to be questioned. Now that is a very strange phenomenon for which we would be discussing it in further. Because if you start questioning the basic premise of everything, then interpretation becomes that much more difficult. And I firmly believe that modern theories, when written, never wanted themselves to be applied to literature, because literature has become an integral part of social sciences nowadays. Okay, so the concept of application is very important nowadays, because we are living in this world of business and technology. Okay, so everything in business is applicable, everything in technology is applicable. So we started believing that everything in literature should also be therefore applicable. Okay, for theorists, there was nothing known as natural. ઓકે, આપણે જે વાત કરીએ બહુ નેચરલી આ તો થાય છે. તો થિયરિસ્ટ શું કહે છે, મોડર્ન થિયરિસ્ટ, કઈ નેચરલ તો છે જ નહીં. નેચરલ ઇઝ સોશિયલી એન્ડ કલ્ચરલી કન્સ્ટ્રક્ટેડ. એ લોકો આ યાદ રાખજો. નેચરલ એ લોકો શું કહે છે, ઇટ ઇઝ સોશિયલી એન્ડ કલ્ચરલી constructed. You construct natural. Now that is going against the very thought of humanistic way of looking at theory. Okay. For example, we take Foucault. Okay. So what does Foucault say? Foucault says nothing is natural. Okay. It is humanly constructed. Now, how do you understand the point of being humanly constructed? Okay. So he says that whatever you do has a construction point of view. Okay. And this is said in the history of sexuality that he wrote. Okay. Earlier we see author's intention was primary. Now we say that experience is also culturally constructed. Okay. And therefore author is also culturally made up. And therefore there is no author as such, as we have in reader response theory, which we will be discussing it in some time. Okay. So experience is culturally constructed. Now an author has to be experienced in order to write something. Therefore author is also a culturally constructed phenomenon. This is how Foucault explains the modern version of looking at things. But here we need to look at two things specifically. There are two critics around 1930, if I remember properly, Wimsatt and Berkeley. All of you must have studied Wimsatt's intentional policy. Okay, and there was Berkeley who wrote effective policy. Now, these are two things that you need to understand in order to understand theory in a better way, because those were path-breaking essays. Okay. Now, what does intentional policy say? In very simple terms, it says text is important. Okay. So you have to debunk the idea of author's intention. There is nothing as author's intention. Everything is fallacious. That means text itself as is constructed, because author is also a culturally constructed phenomenon. Text also becomes culturally constructed. So you don't need an author to understand a text. That is what intentional policy by Wimsatt says. Now if you move towards Berkeley in effective policy, he says that impact to the audience is important. Okay. But that impact varies. Are you getting my point? If there is some impact on the audience, that impact has to vary. For example, if you talk about Hamlet. Now, Hamlet, when it was staged in Europe, in some part of in Germany, I think, Hamlet was laughed upon. Okay. And when it was said in Britain, everybody cried. You understand my point? So your viewpoint with regard to Hamlet would change as you move towards any particular culture from where you come up. What is your cultural upbringing, and in that matter, therefore, what is your social upbringing? Okay. So we are only into theory, we are not into literary theory right now. We are basically focusing on the word theory with capital T. Let us put it that way. So we started with Foucault, then we moved towards Wimsatt, then we talked about Birdsley. So Wimsatt says intentional policy is there. Birdsley says impact on the viewers is important, but the question there that we have to ask is viewers, audience vary. Okay, so how do you understand any particular thing? Then we move towards 1960s, late 1960s, I think, wherein you had Rolla Bath. Okay, everybody of you must be knowing about Rolla Bath. All of you are students of literature. So Rolla Bath says death of the author. So there is no author. But from where does Rolla Bath get this idea? From Nietzsche. Okay, Nietzsche says that perspectivism is a problem. Okay, even Nietzsche says there is that of God. God is not there, so God is dead. Okay, now God is also a construct of faith. It is a community creation. God એટલે શું? Community creation છે. Okay, now if you say that there is no community understanding of anything in literature, that means you will have to be understanding things in isolation. Therefore, you understand death of the author. Okay, which is a cultural construction, a common creation of a particular community to come out of any kind of fear that you might possess in your personality. We created God. Okay, so what does God do? God is space. But what is the problem with that? The concept of God is dead. Okay, the modern theory says there are no shared values, there is individualism. Are you getting my point? So when you are not sharing any values, that means you are not sharing common creations created by humans in order to understand something. So you are becoming highly individual. That is what Rolla Bath says. Okay. Now, in this context, so now moving towards Rolla Bath and Nietzsche, in this context, what you start believing is meaning is open to the reader. Okay. So what does a reader do? A reader interacts. Okay. Interacts with what? Interacts with text. So there is no absolute meaning. This is what the modern way of thinking justifies. I hope I am making myself clear up till this point. Okay. So we are going first forward and then we will move back and then perhaps understand what literary theory has to do. So when I said about individual interpretation, now see, it is a very strange thing, because if you read Shakespeare, the most common read of all the Nobel laureates and in literature as well, is that there are more than 5 lakh interpretations of Shakespeare. More than 5 lakh interpretation of Shakespeare's work around the world. Okay. Therefore, you can very easily say that Shakespeare is understood in 5 lakh ways, and those 5 lakh people are very intellectual theorists. Now, they make others understand, and I am trying to make you understand of what it is. I am in between. A theory written by somebody, I am trying to interpret, and then you are further filtering it, so that the chain has to expand. So there are many interpretations of a particular author or of a particular work. So that is very clear. Now you see, there are many books that are written in opposition of theories. In literature classroom, we are always told that, everything is related to theory and you should understand theory, and theory is for the elite class and you don't have to do anything. But if you're good at understanding theory, that means you're good at literature. Now both are separate entities. Okay, there is one book against theory. There is another book beyond theory. Then there is another book after theory. Then there is another book, limitations of theory. And in limitations of theory, there is one chapter, terrors of theory. Okay, so theory itself is debatable. But in our literature classroom, we are never allowed to debate theory. We only debate about theory. Okay. So there is no point that is given to you wherein you start debating the existence of theory itself. You only debate if there is a theory, how do we understand that theory? That is the debate that we get into, and we never get into what if there is no theory. So that is the debate that we need to get into. These are names that I give you out of the certain books, easily available online also, and you'll get a lot of literature on it online as well. Now you see, on this ground, there is one very important American educationalist. Okay, E.D. Hirsch is his name. Hirsch. If you want to search it on Google, E.D. Hirsch, he challenges theories. He says that if a poem has a meaning of its own, how can you arrange words? That is a valid question. Okay, because words show intentions. Intentions are of the author, and author's intentions will always remain relevant. So you cannot deny the existence of author ever. Okay, author has to be there. If you are criticizing a poetry or appreciating a poetry, you are appreciating words written by any particular author. Now that author has an understanding of any particular word. Now understanding of that word therefore becomes very pivotal. Okay. For me, the word autumn may carry extraordinary experiences of my life which I would directly relate to, and therefore my expression for the word autumn would be very different from your expression for the word autumn. Okay, this is just an example. If you like any particular word, that is because you have some attachment with that word that is cultural or social or related to your experience about understanding anything. So that is how it is. So you cannot even try to debate. This is what I believe, that there can be no author in any written text. Author's intention only creates any text. Without that, no creation is possible. So we are trying to debunk what Rolabad has to say, what reader response theory has to say, because you need an author to understand the text. So let us make this very clear. Okay? I will give you another example. If there are multiple interpretations, now who interprets? That is the question. For example, there is one poetry. Now that poetry is interpreted by, say, a student of literature like you, and somebody saying besides you who is not at all interested in literature, who is a student of commerce. So your intellectual involvement in poetry is what matters, because mere reading and mere interpretation just for the sake of the word interpretation is of no use. It has to be intellectual. That means you need to have a proper background of what you are reading, whom you are reading, who has constructed what are the things that you need to understand in order to understand the basic creation of poetry. These are basic questions which are to be taken into account. Nobody can interpret poetry just like that. Okay, you just pick up a poetry and start interpreting. That is not how poetry is meant to be interpreted. Poetry was never meant to be interpreted. Poetry was meant always to be felt. But your feeling about any particular thing, this has to be in relation to how you have created the world around you after a lot of reading in literature. Okay? Therefore, we can very easily say that reader response is a bit flawed according to me. Okay? Now, slightly moving towards literature. This was theory. Now we are slightly moving towards literature. So what is literature? That is the most common question we ask. So literature gives insights into life. Very simple. Literature શું કરે? લાઈફ ની અંદર તમને ઇન્સાઇટ આપે. ઓકે? કોણ ઇન્સાઇટ આપે? ઓથર ઇન્સાઇટ આપે. કેમ આપે? Because author has a greater sensitivity as compared to you being a very routine person. Okay? So there is this greater sensitivity that you get into. Okay? Now we move to Arnold. What does Arnold have to say? How to live is literature. Matthew Arnold શું કહે છે? How to live is literature. જીવન કેવી રીતે જીવવું એને સાહિત્ય કહેવાય. Okay? Therefore, on this account, theory becomes divisive. Okay? Theory's base is nihilism. આ યાદ રાખવાનું. Theory નો base શું છે? Nihilism છે. Nihilism એટલે શું? Non-belief. Okay? So when you start not believing something, you start creating, rather not creating, constructing theory. Okay? So literature becomes for theory is in the front seat. Okay? So in literature, now see the whole pendulum shift. You write literature for theory, or you write theory for literature. Neither. But what is the problem right now? That theory is in the front seat and literature is in the back seat. That should have never happened. Okay? Literature has to always be on the front seat and never on the back seat. So this you have to be very clear. Theory is written for the sake of writing, not for literature. So theory can never be in the front seat. When we start reading a text, in our mind, what do we have? If you recently studied structuralism, so you start reading a text through structuralism. Why are you doing that? What is the need of doing that? Or you start reading any text through deconstruction. Why are you doing that? Is there any need of deconstructing text always? Why don't you read any particular text as text? So theories are colored eyeglasses. આ પ્રોબ્લેમ છે થિયરી નો. શું પ્રોબ્લેમ છે? કલર્ડ આઈ ગ્લાસીસ છે. આપણી આંખો નાંજી દીધી. અને કોઈ પણ વસ્તુ આપણે થિયરી થી આગળ જોઈ શકતા જ નથી. લિટરેચર ની પહેલા કોનું ફિલ્ટર લગાડી દે છે? થિયરી નું. ઊંધું હોવું જોઈએ ખરેખર. લિટરેચર તો જેમ તેમ વાંચવાનું. બરાબર છે? એમાં થિયરી તો પછી જો એવું લાગુ પડતું હોય તો તમારે મૂકવાની, બાકી નહીં મૂકવાની. So you will have to see everything as it is. Okay? Not through anything. So first of all, what you need to do from today, if you start reading something, is erase your mind from all the theories that you might be knowing, because they are theories of social sciences. આ નોંધમાં એક નાખો. એ social sciences literature નો ભાગ છે, literature નથી. You understand? Social sciences is a part of literature. Social sciences is not literature per se. Okay? So you know, the ideology kills. What is the problem? We read through any particular ideology and that is the problem. Okay? For example, if I am not a feminist, why should I read a book through feminism? Is there any logic in it? If I am reading Virginia Woolf, for example, why should I be reading Virginia Woolf through the theory of viewers that, you know, she wrote a theory on feminism. Now if it is written by Virginia Woolf, I'll have to read it through feminism. Why should I do that? I'm not a feminist myself. So if I am not something, why I'm trying to read it in that particular manner? That is where the gap between your personal understanding and what actually a theory makes you understand creates a difference. Okay? When Virginia Woolf writes a particular text, or when a person, a director, you know, makes a particular movie about women, she might not be feminist. She just wants to tell a story in text or in a movie. You start thinking that, okay, this world is a world of feminism, so we should be viewing this through feminism, and you start interpreting things. We are very fond of making things difficult. That is what our basic hobby is. Okay? We always want to make things very difficult because we don't want others to understand what we are understanding ourselves. That is the problem. in literature classroom that I always see. Okay, so everything written in literature with regard to what basic human emotions. નહીં બહાર જાઓ, ઇમોશન્સ જ હોય ને, તમે ઇમોશન્સ ને જોટ ડાઉન કરો, એની બહાર કોઈ દુનિયાની સ્ટોરી, કોઈ દુનિયાની પોએમ, કોઈ દુનિયાનો ડ્રામા નહીં હોય. ઓકે, આ વસ્તુ તમને શું સમજાવે છે કે લિટરેચર એન્ડ સોશિયલ સાયન્સીસ આર ડિફરન્ટ. Don't merge it unnecessarily. You merge it where it is required, but if you start merging them unnecessarily, that might create a problem in terms of your interpretation of any particular text, as I said. Okay, this is what Edward said had to say when he wrote Orientalism, or when he wrote cultural imperialism. You must have read both of them. Okay, so nowadays, because literature is in this world of science, આ પ્રોબ્લેમ આપણે જે ફેસ કરીએ છીએ, ઘણા ક્વેશ્ચન્સ આવતા હોય છે, આપણે ગ્રુપમાં એવું લખ્યું હતું કે આની ઉપર કંઈક ડિસ્કસ કરીએ. સાયન્સના વર્લ્ડમાં લિટરેચર, તો સાયન્સ આપણને આઈડિયા આપે. વોટ ડઝ સાયન્સ ગીવ? આઈડિયા. વોટ ડઝ એપ્લાઇડ સાયન્સ ગીવ? ટેકનોલોજી. ઓકે, science gives you any particular idea, and in that applied science gives you technology. Similarly, applied theory gives you what you should understand if you need to understand something through a different perspective. So science and literature parallel. Even literature gives you an idea. You don't need to always get into the concept of technology. Here technology is theory in order to understand anything. Okay, if you pick up any particular choice, you don't become that. Okay, are you getting my point? તમે કોઈ વસ્તુને ચૂઝ કરો, તમે બની ન જાઓ કઈ. For example, if I eat Chinese food, do I become Chinese? I will not become Chinese. If I eat Italian food, would I become Italian? I would not become Italian. French, not French. Mexican, not Mexican. Okay, so that is my choice of eating any particular food. That does not culturally make me Chinese, or that does not culturally make me Italian. Similar is the thing with reading literature. Okay, you don't literature through binoculars, or if you start reading literature through a binocular, don't always try to justify everything with those binoculars. That is the problem. Okay, in cultural imperialism, Edward said has said, theories are not serious affairs. યાદ રાખજો, એડવર્ડ સેડ શું કે છે? સિરીઝ ને બહુ સિરિયસલી લેવાની નહીં. આ તો બધું બોલ્યા કરે, આપણે એને વધુ પડતું સિરિયસલી લઈ લઈએ. અત્યારે તો મને એવું જ લાગે છે કે આજના વર્લ્ડમાં આપણે લિટરરી થિયરી અને ક્રિટિસિઝમ ને એક એટલું મોટું સ્વરૂપ આપી દીધું છે, એટલું મોટું કદાચ ન હોવું જોઈએ, કારણ કે બહુ લેયર્ડ અને બહુ સહેલું બની શકે જો આપણે ધારીએ તો. ઓકે, લિટરેચર સ્ટડીઝ have become low pressure areas. Problem ક્યાં રહી ગયો છે? Anatomy of Criticism, North of Fry, 1958-7, I don't remember. Okay, and શું કીધું? Literature studies have become low pressure areas. Low pressure area નો meaning શું થાય? એ એરિયામાં લો પ્રેશર હોય ને, ત્યાં બધેથી હાઈ પ્રેશર, શું કહેવાય, હાઈ પ્રેશર આસ્પેક્ટ એલિમેન્ટ, સોરી, હાઈ પ્રેશર એલિમેન્ટ આવે અને તમારી ઉપર ઓવરપાવર કરે. આ પ્રોબ્લેમ લિટરેચર નો થયો. લિટરેચર એટલું લો પ્રેશર એરિયા થઈ ગયું, બધા પોતપોતાની થિયરી લાવીને લિટરેચર ઉપર નાખે છે, અને આપણે પાછા લિટરેચરના સ્ટુડન્ટ અને લર્નર્સ થઈને એવું વિચારીએ છીએ કે ભાઈ આ જે લો પ્રેશર એરિયામાં બધો કચરો આપણી પર ફેંકવામાં આવે છે, કચરો તો નહીં કહીએ ચલો, પણ બધી વસ્તુઓ જે ફેંકવામાં આવી છે એને આપણે પ્રોપર જસ્ટિફાઈ કરતા જ રહીએ એવું જરૂરી નથી. ઓકે, you take for instance Derrida. You must have read Derrida, every one of you. Okay, so what does Derrida talk about? Derrida talks about binary. What is binary? What is first is first, what is second is second. So that is what the question is. For example, day and night, then what is important? Day. Okay, truth and lies, what is important? Lies. That is not how you read literature. Okay, literature was never written to impress. Let me tell you, literature was always written to express. Now what we are doing through literature and through theories, we are trying to impress rather than expressing. So this is a problem. You read Althusser, you read Spivak, you read Derrida, you read Foucault, you read Kristeva. Okay, theory is thinking about thinking. Theory no base શું છે? When you start thinking about thinking, that becomes theory. Okay, That means you have to question endlessly. સતત સવાલ કર્યા કરો. જોનાથન કલર કહે છે ને કે you question endlessly in modern time. Okay? But questioning without grounding is of no use. Why don't you understand that? કોઈ પણ વસ્તુ જયારે તમે ક્વેશ્ચન કરો તો એનું બેઝિક ગ્રાઉન્ડિંગ જે હોવું જોઈએ, ગ્રાઉન્ડિંગ જ નથી, તો તમે શું કરશો? યુ આર ક્વેશ્ચનિંગ ઇન ઓબ્લિવિયન. જે પણ વસ્તુ ક્વેશ્ચન કરો છો, શેમાં ક્વેશ્ચન કરો છો? ઓબ્લિવિયનમાં ક્વેશ્ચન કરે રાખો જ્યાં સુધી નો સામે વાળો માણસ ક્વેશ્ચન થી થાકી જાય ત્યાં સુધી. એવું ન હોય. તમારા ક્વેશ્ચન ને એક પ્રોપર ગ્રાઉન્ડિંગ હોવું જોઈએ. ઓકે, હવે આ બધી થિયરી જે મોડર્ન છે આવી શેમાંથી? એટલે આપણે વાત કરી મોડર્નિઝમ. તો મોડર્નિઝમ નો બેઝ શું છે? અટેકિંગ હ્યુમનિઝમ. ઓકે, ધેટ મીન્સ you always have to question what is you are getting against humanism. એટલે મોડર્ન થિયરી જેટલી પણ હશે એ તમને શું શીખવાડશે? Start questioning the very root. But is the root to us clear? And the question to it is, there is no root. When you say that Derrida ends everything in binary, so binary is two, so there is no singularity in binary. So how would you come to a proper conclusion even if you have binary? Any other theory જઈ જ ન શકે. Okay, the problem is that you cannot go back. Okay, and therein the question of tradition starts or comes into account. T.S. Eliot જે tradition ની વાત કરી હતી એ શું કહે છે? Tradition is assimilating better things and letting go of things which are not good enough. Okay, so what is the question? We will have to evolve a literary theory. We don't have to follow a literary theory. આ મગજમાં એક આપણે નાખી દેવાનું છે કે આપણે થિયરી ને ઇવોલ્વ કરવા તરફ જવાનું છે, નહીં કે ફોલો કરવા તરફ. આપણે સતત ફોલો જ કર્યા કરીએ છીએ. ઓકે, so we are not talking about making theories redundant. We are talking about bringing back the humanistic concept of interpreting literature in literature again, because in tradition, as you talked, it is in tradition, but there are certain very good things in tradition also. I said constantly questioning is of no use without grounding. Okay, now I will give you, see what happens. So you said this is theory. So who is Lacan? Lacan is from psychology. Who is Foucault? Foucault is from anthropology. Who is Derrida? Derrida is from philosophy. હવે આ બધા લિટરરી થિયરી લખવા માટે થોડી થિયરી લખી છે. લકાએ સાયકોલોજી માટે લખી, ફુકો એન્થ્રોપોલોજી માટે લખી, ડેરિડાએ ફિલોસોફી માટે લખી. આપણે એને લિટરેચરમાં લઈ લીધું. ઓકે, બીકોઝ લિટરેચર ઇઝ ઓલ ઇન્ક્લુઝિવ. આ આપણું એક ડેફિનેશન છે. ઓકે, બટ ધેટ ડઝ નોટ મીન you keep on including everything without giving your own thought upon it. Okay, if you buy something from outside, for example, you go to buy furniture for your house, what will you buy? Not the largest or not the biggest or not the costliest. You will buy what fits in your house. Okay, that does not mean that everything best has to fit in. Sometimes that might not fit on any particular work of literature, then you don't need to fit in. So don't buy those things. Okay, so theory and byproducts of theory are the problem areas. So feminism છે theory નું byproduct છે. Okay, હવે તમે એને apply બધી લેડીઝે લખેલી બુક્સ માં જો કરવા જ માંડશો ભાઈ તો બધા વર્ક ફેમિનિસ્ટ થઈ જશે. હવે જયારે લખ્યું એને એવું નહીં ખબર હોય કે ભાઈ મારું વર્ક તો ફેમિનિસ્ટ હતું. Then why are you becoming a feminist? Because you have read a particular theory of feminism and because it is so in time, or it is very good to be a feminist nowadays just for the sake of becoming a feminist. Okay, theories have to make us sensitive. It has to widen the scope of literature. It does not narrow the scope of literature. થિયરી આપણને સેન્સિટિવ બનાવે, આપણો સ્કોપ વાઇડ કરે. આપણે એવું નથી સમજવાનું કે આ ફેમિનિઝમ એટલે બસ ઘૂસી જાઓ ને, કે ફુકોએ કીધું તો ઘૂસી જાઓ, કે દરિદાએ કીધું કે સ્ટ્રક્ચરલિઝમમાં ઘૂસી જાઓ. એવી રીતે આપણે કોઈ થિયરીને સમજી શકીએ નહીં અને એવી રીતે લિટરેચરને ઇન્ટરપ્રિટ કરાય નહીં, એટલે ડિફિકલ્ટ થઈ જાય. ઓકે, વી ઓલવેઝ રીડ અબાઉટ એવરીથિંગ એન્ડ ધેટ ઇઝ ધ પ્રોબ્લેમ. આપણો પ્રોબ્લેમ શું છે? આપણે અબાઉટમાં રસ છે, જે છે એમાં રસ નથી. પહેલા એના વિષય વાંચીએ પછી એ વાંચીએ. ઓકે, તમે જુઓ Earlier in humanistic criticism, everything was a counter response to something. Plato to Aristotle. So Aristotle is answering to Plato, then it goes to Sidney, then it goes to Dryden, then it goes to Shelley, then it goes to Eliot, then it goes to Pound. આ એક ચેઇન છે ને તો બધા એકબીજાને જવાબ આપે છે લિટરેચર ને રિલેટેડ. હવે આ બધી જે મોડર્ન થિયરી આવી એમાં તો લિટરેચર કઈ છે નહીં. પ્લેટો લિટરેચર વિશે લખે તો એરિસ્ટોટલ એને ડિનાય કરે. એરિસ્ટોટલ લખે તો સિડની ડિનાય કરે, સિડની લખે તો ડ્રાઇડન ડિનાય કરે, ડ્રાઇડન લખે તો શેલી ડિનાય કરે, શેલી લખે તો ઇલિયટ ડિનાય કરે, ઇલિયટ લખે તો પાઉન્ડ ડિનાય કરે. પછી પ્રોબ્લેમ ચાલુ થયા કે આ બધી લિટરરી થિયરીઝ હતી ને મોડર્ન થિયરીઝ છે શું છે માત્ર થિયરીઝ છે. ઓકે, એક વસ્તુ આપણા મગજમાં જે આપણે બહુ સ્ટ્રોંગલી એડ કરી દેવાની છે, એક ક્લોઝેટમાં બંધ નહીં પણ ખુલ્લું રાખવાનું છે. લિટરેચર ઇઝ નોટ બિઝનેસ. Okay, you don't have to choose everything. Okay, and nothing in literature is mechanical. જ્યારે આપણે થિયરી લઈને લિટરેચર ને વાંચીએ તો આપણે કેવું મિકેનિક્સ માં જતા રહીએ છીએ, તો સોલ જતો રહે એનો. કોઈ વસ્તુ મિકેનિકલ નથી. હમણાં એક modern way of saying things to impress the people who are listening to you is, I have constructed this poetry. Now what is construction? Construction is a very mechanical, non-living process. A poem is created, poem cannot be constructed. Modern people or modern these experts, so-called on literary theory, also talk that individual is constructed. Am I a construction? Are you a construction? No, we are not. We are creation. We are thinking individuals. Construction is done by somebody else. You cannot self-construct. Okay, do you construct your own house? You cannot construct your own house. You need a lot of things to construct your own house. Okay. Therefore, what is the problem right now? Thought is absent. I had a thought absent થઈ ગઈ છે. Okay. અને જ્યાં thought ન હોય ને ત્યાં problem ચાલુ થાય. Okay. So when you say that Aristotle was poetic, તો એ લિટરરી થિયરી છે. ડેરિડા રોડ બાઇનરી, તો થિયરી છે. સ્પિવાક જેન્ડર પોલિટિક્સ થિયરી છે, લિટરરી થિયરી નથી. સિડની થિયરી, લિટરરી થિયરી. ડ્રાઇડન લિટરરી થિયરી. ટચસ્ટોન મેથડ લિટરરી થિયરી. મોડર્નમાં લકા સાયકોલોજીકલ થિયરી. ઇટ ઇઝ નોટ લિટરરી થિયરી. ઓકે, so you'll have to move to hermeneutics, back to hermeneutics, interpretation of what? I am sure you must be knowing hermeneutics. It is interpreting religious and philosophical texts, okay, through presuppositions and preconditioning and new semiotics and getting into semiotics. And so you'll have to get back to that. Hermeneutic approach becomes very important. Okay, so for example, if Bharat Muni writes about theory of rasa, that is the literary theory. And then you apply it, then it is known as practical criticism. Okay, there is this story, I don't know if it is true or not, that Aristotle came along with Alexander in India, and at that time he met many literary theorists. One of them was Bharat Muni. Okay, many Indian philosophers, and they exchanged ideas about theory per se in terms of literature. So there was always this great exchange in whatever was happening in the context of everything. Okay, I'm sorry, I just fell off. Okay, so I hope I have made myself clear on what is theory. Now I want to make this the objective of focusing on this topic today is I want literary theory to be very simple. Okay, I don't want this complexity around literary theory to go on and on for you. Okay, so when you teach others also, it is very simple for them, and therefore it becomes interesting. You don't have to run away from theory. Okay, so now when you talk about literary theory, there are three aspects. One is the author first. In between there is text. Third is the reader or the audience. Okay. Now, what is the problem is that author is in past, Reader is in now, and therefore time gap becomes important. Okay, because time leads to change, to difference, to different interpretation, to different perception also. Okay, so your sensibility changes. Author sensibility cannot be your sensibility. Any text should have readability also. Okay, so literary theory here becomes a binocular. Literary theory એક એવો binocular છે જેમાંથી તમે author ને અને text ને સમજી શકો છો. હવે જ્યારે તમે text ની વાત કરો તો text માં કેવી વસ્તુ આવે? Formalism. What is formalism? Formalism is content related to form. Formalism માંથી શું આવ્યું? New criticism, that is mid 20th century. Okay, but nowadays even new criticism is old because it was in early 20th century. Okay, so then there comes text per se. So text per se એટલે શું? Stylistics પછી શું આવે? Okay, new formalism આવે. So when you start becoming or talking about text per se, these are the approaches that you get into. Okay, so the question here is, which literary theory needs to be adapted in order to understand any particular text? If you want to understand any particular text through literary theory. What is literary theory? આપણો જે ટોપિક છે એની જગ્યાએ આપણે ક્યાં આવી ગયા? Which literary theory? Okay, for example, you say postmodernism. So what is postmodernism? In social context, it is humans breaking down. બહુ simply એને સમજો તો postmodernism એટલે શું છે? Humans breaking down is postmodernism. Therefore, in postmodern theories, what do you have? Text breaking down. That means you break down text in order to understand what is and what is not. You start interpreting things as they are, okay, through a particular text. So that is how you deal with that particular issue. The problem is that no text can be written in isolation. આ એક વસ્તુ તમારા મગજમાં એડ કરી દો કે કોઈ પણ ટેક્સ્ટ આઇસોલેશનમાં ભાઈ લખાઈ શકે નહીં. તમારા મગજમાં ઘણી વસ્તુઓ ચાલતી હોવી જોઈએ તો જ તમે એક ટેક્સ્ટ લખી શકો. For example, if you say structuralism, okay, so what is structuralism? Structuralism is approaching one text in the line of another. એક text ને બીજાની લાઈનમાં તમે અપ્રોચ કરો એને structuralism કહેવાય. Okay, for example, you are reading a fairy tale. So any fairy tale has to have something which is related to a happy concept. Somebody comes and saves your life. So that is the structure that you follow when you read a particular text. Okay. Structure, repeating and creating meaning. There has to be a helper. કોઈ પણ એક વસ્તુ એટલે હેલ્પ કરે. તમે જે સ્ટ્રક્ચરલિઝમ ની વાત કરો તો શું થાય? આ સ્ટ્રક્ચર આમાંથી છે, આ સ્ટ્રક્ચર આમાંથી છે, એવું જાઓ એટલે સ્ટ્રક્ચરલિઝમ કહેવાય. એના પછી શું આવે તો કે નરેટોલોજી. What is narratology? Stories having common ways to narrate. So simple છે. Okay, that is common structure of the stories is considered as narratology. Then you come towards author. અત્યારે આપણે બધી વાત કરીએ છે ને વાત કરીએ ટેક્સ્ટની. ન્યૂ ક્રિટિસિઝમ, ફોર્મલિઝમ, ન્યૂ ફોર્મલિઝમ, પોસ્ટમોડર્નિઝમ, સ્ટ્રક્ચરલિઝમ, નરેટોલોજી, આ બધી શેની વાત થઈ? ટેક્સ્ટ. હવે ધારો કે ઓથર ઉપર આવી. પહેલા 3 પોઈન્ટ યાદ છે ને? ઓથર, ટેક્સ્ટ અને ઓડિયન્સ. ઓકે, ઓથરમાં શું ઇમ્પોર્ટન્ટ હોય? રૂટ ઉપર જઈએ તો બાયોગ્રાફી. બાયોગ્રાફી એટલે સાયકોલોજી. સાયકોલોજી એટલે સાયકોલોજીકલ એનાલિસિસ, analyzing any trauma or anything that is important in author's life. So cause becomes important. Important શું છે? લખાણ વાંચવા માટે cause કેમ લખ્યું? Cause એટલે social background. Social background એટલે historicism. Historicism માં માર્ક્સિસ્ટ અપ્રોચ આવે. માર્ક્સિસ્ટ અપ્રોચ હોય તો ધારો કે આપણે કોઈ વસ્તુને માર્ક્સિસ્ટ અપ્રોચ થી વાંચીએ તો ટેક્સ્ટ ઇઝ અ પ્રોડક્ટ ઓફ સોશિયલ બેકગ્રાઉન્ડ એવું આપણે કહીએ. ઓકે, પણ એના સોશિયલ અને ઇન્ટેલેક્ચ્યુઅલ લિમિટેશન્સ તો હોય ને, ફ્રી વિલ હોય. Why should I read a particular text through Marxist perspective if I am not a Marxist? Just because it is said you should read like this. Okay, if any particular text is written in any particular way, I should not be necessarily following that. I may not follow that also. Through that comes new historicism. Okay, so what does new historicism say? The text is influenced by historical things. Okay, there is a different sense of power. There is a difference between the different viewpoints that you might have with regard to history. That is new historicism. Okay, therefore, from text to author, now to audience. So what does audience do? Reader response theory જેની હમણાં આપણે વાત કરી કે meaning હંમેશા ફ્લક્સમાં હોય. meaning શેમાં હોય? ફ્લક્સમાં. પણ તમે આમ જોવા જાવ તો reader response theory તો એરિસ્ટોટલના ટાઈમથી છે. What is catharsis, you see? Catharsis is response of a particular person who is watching the drama. So a feeling differently is also catharsis. So you start understanding, you start interpreting things through a different viewpoint. That is what is important. Okay. So when you say that there are three things in any literary theory, one is the author, second is the text, third is the audience. આ ત્રણમાં જ literary theory વેચાયેલી હોય, આની બહાર જઈ શકે નહીં. તો હવે આપણે literary theory પર છે ઉપર આવીએ. So what is literary theory? It is all about theoretical double speak. Theories વિશે આપણે થોડી નાની મોટી માહિતી લઈને વાતો કરીએ અને literary theory કહેવાય. Okay? It is basically an idea or a framework for application. બહુ સિમ્પલી આપણે મૂકીએ છીએ. કોઈ પણ એક ફ્રેમવર્ક તમને આપવામાં આવે એપ્લિકેશન કરવા માટે અને આપણે લિટરરી થિયરી નું નામ આપી દઈએ. હવે લિટરરી થિયરી એને યાદ રાખજો. બેઝિકલી એ શું છે? થિયરીઝ છે. It ideally should be a part of first or the second year way of talking things. આ મારો એક પ્રોબ્લેમ છે જે હું તમારી સાથે શેર કરીશ કે આપણે ક્રિટિસિઝમ ને આપણે થિયરી ટીવાય માં ભણીએ અને એનું એપ્લિકેશન એફઆઈએસવાય માં ભણીએ. તો ઊંધું થયું ને. કરિક્યુલમમાં કોર્સમાં લિટરરી થિયરી અને ક્રિટિસિઝમ ફર્સ્ટ યરના ફર્સ્ટ સેમેસ્ટરનો ભાગ હોવો પડે, નહીં કે લાસ્ટ યરના લાસ્ટ સેમેસ્ટરનો. તમે ટેક્સ્ટ ઇન્ટરપ્રિટ કરી, તમે પોએમ ઇન્ટરપ્રિટ કરી, તમે ડ્રામા ઇન્ટરપ્રિટ કર્યા, પછી તમે આવ્યા કે ભાઈ આ હતું લિટરરી થિયરી, આ બધું વાંચવાનું તમારે રહી ગયું, પછી બાકી. ઓકે, so we have to shift that concept in order to make students aware about the being of literary theory as such. Okay, so there are certain sets of principles used in analyzing literature, and those sets of principles are known as literary theories. Okay, now see, what is the question here? The question is, for example, if I have to ask you a question is, have you read literature? હું તમને સવાલ પૂછું તો તમારો જવાબ શું હોય? Most of the times it has to be yes, because you are students of literature, you must have read literature. તેનો કાઉન્ટર ક્વેશ્ચન બીજો છે, મોટા ભાગના સારા થિંકર્સ છે એ શું કહે છે? હાઉ ડુ યુ નો? તમને કેમ ખબર એ લિટરેચર છે? આ વેલિડ ક્વેશ્ચન છે. ઓકે, as not every printed book is literature. એ બધું ભૂલી જજો. everything is literature as it is nonsense. બરાબર? Every printed book is not literature. So what makes any particular text suitable to be placed in literature section? આવો તમને ક્યારે જવાબ દો, તમે જયારે કોઈ બુક સ્ટોરમાં જાઓ ને, બુક સ્ટોરમાં જઈને તમે કોઈ જગ્યાએ જાઓ તો ત્યાં એવું હોય લિટરેચર એન્ડ ફિક્શન, પછી ત્યાં મેગેઝિન ન પડ્યા હોય. તો એવું કેમ? એ લોકોના મગજમાં એવું કેમ આવ્યું હશે કે ભાઈ આ જ લિટરેચરનો ભાગ છે ને, અહીંયા જ આટલી વસ્તુ આવી જોઈએ, બાકી કોઈ વસ્તુ અહીંયા ન આવી જોઈએ? આવો ક્વેશ્ચન આપણને થવો જોઈએ. ઓકે, ઇટ ઇઝ નોટ ઓનલી અબાઉટ ડ્રામા, પોએટ્રી, ફિક્શન, એસે. એવું જરૂરી નથી. અચ્છા, લિટરેચર લખવું જરૂરી છે, લિટરેચર પ્રિન્ટ કરવું જરૂરી છે, લિટરેચર શેર કરવું જરૂરી છે? એનો જવાબ છે ના. હવે હું તમને પાછો એ સવાલ પૂછું, હેવ યુ રેડ લિટરેચર? તો એનો જવાબ શું થાય? I might have seen literature also, I might have heard literature also, I might have shared literature also, but that particular literature has to be in a particular compartment. Everything cannot be literature just for the sake of theorizing something. Okay, so which books would you put in literature section? આ તમારે તમને સવાલ પૂછવો પડે, નાનો જવાબ તમારે જ જાતે લાવવો પડે. ઓકે, એનો મોટા ભાગનો જવાબ શું હોય? હું તમને એવું, તમારી ફેવરેટ બુક કઈ? તો નોર્મલી એ ફેવરેટ બુક તમારા ટીચરે તમને કીધી હોય એ હોય. એટલે આપણી માટે લિટરેચર શું થઈ ગયું? અમારા ટીચર આવું કીધું કે આને લિટરેચર કહેવાય, એટલે આ લિટરેચર છે. ઓકે, so are literary texts more valuable? The answer to it is yes, absolutely. But then the question is, what is value? Okay, એનો જવાબ કદાચ સ્ટોન મેથડ આપણે જે છે, ઓકે, એની ઉપર થી મળી જાય કે ભાઈ કોઈ પણ લિટરેચર જે છે it should pass the test of time. પણ આનો પાછો પ્રશ્ન કાઉન્ટર એવો થાય આમાં કે જેને આપણે પોપ્યુલર લિટરેચર કહીએ છીએ, ઓકે, અથવા જેની માટે એક ટર્મ છે સુપર માર્કેટ લિટરેચર. સો સુપર માર્કેટ લિટરેચર ક્લાસિક છે. ક્લાસિક નો મિનિંગ શું? નોર્મલી વર્ષોથી એવી ને એવી પરિસ્થિતિમાં જળવાઈ રહેલી એની ક્ષમતાને આપણે ક્લાસિક કહીએ. હવે ત્યાંનો રાઇટર છે 100 વર્ષ પછી ક્લાસિક થઈ ગયો તો તમને ખબર છે? યુ ડોન્ટ નો. ઓકે, so the standards of literary value and evaluations of literature or literary excellence change over time. આ એક વસ્તુ તમારા મગજમાં રાખવાની. It has to change. A person whom I don't like may become greatest after 50 years. I don't know. Okay, but I don't like is my set of assumptions, which is not based on any literary theory. Okay, so any literature or any literary theory is all about making assumptions on what makes literature literature. પ્રશ્ન ક્યાં થાય છે? સાહિત્યને સાહિત્ય શું બનાવે? Okay, and then you start constituting the theories with regard to that. કે ચલો હવે આપણે થિયરી બનાવીએ. આ ખરેખર વે છે લિટરરી થિયરી. પેલો વે તો અલગ છે, તો બહારથી આપણે લાવીએ છીએ, પણ આપણે કંઈક લાવવાનું છે. ઓકે, સો લિટરરી થિયરી ઇઝ નોટ સમથિંગ ધેટ યુ લર્ન, રાધર યુ બીકમ અવેર ઓફ ઇટ. એ તમારી અંદર ગ્રો થવું પડે. ઓકે, લિટરરી થિયરી જે છે કઈ વાંચવાની રીત નથી, એ તમારે ફીલ કરવાની રીત છે. તમારી અંદર ગ્રો ઓર્ગેનિક છે, તમારી અંદર ગ્રો થવું પડે. ઓકે, so in this context literary theory is as old as literature, because the moment you read you conceptualize the theory of how would I be reading, so that is theory also. Okay, so what does it point out? It points out on the set of ideas that have been very influential in the way in which we think. આપણી thinking procedure ઉપર બેઝ છે. ઓકે, અને પછી how teachers and the university people think about theory, એ પ્રોબ્લેમ થઈ જાય. હવે આપણે અત્યારે શું ભણીએ છીએ, જે આપણા ટીચર્સ ને, જેમાં હું પણ આવી ગયો, કે આપણા યુનિવર્સિટીમાં પ્રોફેસર્સ હોય, એમાં પણ હું આવી ગયો, એ લોકોને એવું લાગે છે કે ભાઈ તમારે સ્કોલર બનવું હોય તો તમારે આટલી વસ્તુ આવડવી પડે. 30-40 વર્ષથી જેમ ચાલ્યું આવે જેમ ચલાવીએ કે આપણે કોઈ વાંધો છે નહીં, કારણ કે અઘરું છે ને. ટીચરનો પ્રોબ્લેમ શું છે? ટીચર્સ આર નાઉ બીકમિંગ રિડન્ડન્ટ. એટલે ટીચરે જો ટીચર રહેવું હોય તો કઈ અઘરું આપવું પડે, સહેલું નહીં. એવું તમે સહેલું આપવા માટે બધા ટીચર પછી વેલ્યુ થતી બંધ થઈ, એવું લોકો માને છે, પણ ખરેખર ઊંધું હોય. ઓકે, સો દે સ્ટાર્ટ થ્રોઈંગ જાર્ગન્સ એટ યુ. 5-10 બોર્ડ ઉપર જાર્ગન લખી નાખો અને 5-10 એવા શબ્દો હું બોલી જાઉં જે તમને કાંઈ ખબર ન પડે, એટલે તમને અચાનક એવું લાગવા માંડે કે આઈ એમ સ્ટડીંગ ગ્રીક એન્ડ લેટિન ઇન ઇંગ્લિશ. આવી રીતે નથી કરવાનું. ઓકે, it is a cloud that is covering various approaches. It એટલે literary theory. Literary theory શું છે? ક્લાઉડ છે, એની અંદર અપ્રોચીસ છે. ઓકે, અને બધા અપ્રોચ નું કોમન ફેક્ટર શું છે? that it helps you in shaping text on how it is written and how it should be read. So what is a literary theory? It is a set of approaches. Approaches શેમાંથી આવે છે? linguistics, psychology, anthropology, philosophy, history, economics, gender studies, ethnic studies, political science. આ બધામાંથી થિયરી તમારે આવે. અને આમાંથી તમે આ જે અપ્રોચીસ છે, થિયરી આપણે કહીએ છીએ શું છે? અપ્રોચીસ. એમાંથી તમે લિટરરી થિયરી બનાવો એટલે તમને કેટલું એપ્લિકેબલ છે જુઓ, બધું અપ્લાય નથી કરતા કઈ. ઓકે, સો ઇટ ઇઝ વેરી સરપ્રાઇઝિંગ. હમણાં હું જે બધા બોલ્યો, એન્થ્રોપોલોજી ને, હિસ્ટ્રી ને, ઇકોનોમિક્સ ને, જેન્ડર સ્ટડીઝ ને, લિંગ્વિસ્ટિક્સ ને, એ બધું લિટરેચર નો ભાગ છે નહીં. તો હવે તમારી સામે એક નવો વિસ્તા ખુલી ગયો. શું થયો? લિટરરી થિયરી હેઝ નથિંગ ટુ ડુ વિથ લિટરેચર. આમાં કે લિટરેચર વર્ડ તો આવે જ નહીં. હમણાં જેટલા પણ મેં વર્ડ કીધા એમાં લિટરેચર વર્ડ તો હતો જ નહીં. સો નાઉ વી હેવ ટુ મૂવ ફ્રોમ ધ ક્વેશ્ચન ઓફ વોટ ટુ વાય. ક્વેશ્ચન વોટ ની જગ્યાએ શું પરિવર્તિત થઈ ગયો છે? વાય લિટરરી થિયરી. ઓકે, સો વાય ઇઝ લિટરરી થિયરી ઇમ્પોર્ટન્ટ? આવો સવાલ તમને થવો જોઈએ. તો એમાં લિટરરી એજ્યુકેશન હવે ઇમ્પોર્ટન્ટ બિઝનેસ થઈ ગયો છે. એટલે એજ્યુકેશન શું છે? ઇટ ઇઝ અ બિઝનેસ નાઉ. ઓકે, સો લિટરરી થિયરી ઇઝ ઇમ્પોર્ટન્ટ બીકોઝ ઇટ ઇઝ રિલેટેડ ટુ લિટરરી એજ્યુકેશન. હવે બેઝિકલી તો હંમેશા આપણે બે જ રીતે ભણતા આવ્યા છીએ. ઓકે, પહેલી વસ્તુ છે ક્લોઝ રીડિંગ ઇઝ ઇમ્પોર્ટન્ટ. કોઈ પણ વસ્તુમાં તમારે શું કરવું પડે? ક્લોઝ રીડિંગ કરવું પડે. ઓકે, વાય યુ ચૂઝ વોટ યુ ચૂઝ, આ તમારા મગજમાં સેટ કરવું પડે. ઇફ આઈ ચૂઝ અ પર્ટિક્યુલર ટેક્સ્ટ, વાય એમ આઈ ચૂઝિંગ ઇટ? એ મારી આઈડિયોલોજીને રિલેટેડ હોવી જોઈએ એટલે મેં ચૂઝ કર્યું. એટલે એમાં પછી સેમના ઉપર જાઓ, તો વર્ડ્સ ઉપર જાઓ, ફ્રેઝીસ ઉપર જાઓ, સેન્ટેન્સ ઉપર જાઓ, પેરેગ્રાફ ઉપર જાઓ, ઇમેજીસ હોય, સિમ્બલ્સ હોય, મીટર હોય, રામ હોય. Everything written has to have a sense of purpose. And we have to figure out what that sense of purpose and what are the specific reasons on why it is written. Okay? So technicality becomes important. Technicality important છે ને એટલે literary theory ઘણી વાર important થઈ જાય. એ પણ બધું લખ્યું છે, શું કામ લખ્યું છે, વર્ડ કેમ ત્યાં છે, ફ્રેઝ કેમ ત્યાં છે, પેરેગ્રાફ એક ઓથરે શું વિચાર્યું, કેમ એને આ જ વર્ડ યુઝ કર્યો, કેમ બીજો નહીં, તો ઓથર ઇમ્પોર્ટન્ટ થઈ જાય. So technicality becomes important, history becomes important, conventions becomes important, form becomes important, everything around it becomes important. So you have to read everything closely, અને આપણે close reading કહીએ. જ્યારે તમે બધા technicality અને history અને convention અને form બધામાં જાઓ ને, linguistically, pragmatically, socially, culturally, એને close reading કહેવાય. તો close reading તમારી અંદર શું ડેવલપ કરે? Rhetoric, sense of argumentation, explicifications, how you explicit any particular text, evidential writing આવે એવું એક ટર્મ છે. You know, you go through evidences of why this is written. એ તો તમારે શોધવું પડે ને, because you are curious as a reader to know why this author is writing on this. Okay, and then you learn about critics in the other way of studying. બે પ્રકાર. એક પહેલો પ્રકારમાં તમને કીધું આ બધું આવ્યું, શું આવ્યું? ક્લોઝ રીડિંગ. અને બીજો પ્રકાર જેમાં આપણે છીએ ને એના ઉપર આપણે આવીએ. આપણે શેમાં છીએ? We always read about critics. What is said by whom? કોણે શું કીધું? તો બે રીત થઈ. એક રીડ ઓરિજિનલ, બીજું રીડ અબાઉટ. ઓકે, પણ ઇમ્પોર્ટન્ટ તો બે છે, પણ આપણી માટે ઇમ્પોર્ટન્સ એકનું જ છે. Okay, we always read about. We don't read what is written exactly. Okay, so important literature માં શું થઈ જાય? Originality and thorough knowledge. બે વસ્તુ ઇમ્પોર્ટન્ટ થઈ જાય. તમારામાં કોઈ વસ્તુની thorough knowledge હોવી પડે અને ઓરિજિનાલિટી હોવી પડે. ઓકે, આપણે કોઈ પણ બુક, આજે હું તમને એમ કહું કે તમે બુક શોપ ઉપર બુક લેવા જાઓ તો તમે શેના આધારે બુક લેવા જશો? તમે જે થિયરી સાથે લાગતા વળગતા છો ને એના આધારે બુક લેશો. તો મને એક્ઝિસ્ટેન્શિયલ રાઇટિંગ બહુ ગમે, કે મને આમ આ બુક છે ફેમિનિસ્ટ રાઇટિંગ બહુ ગમે, કે મને સાયકોલોજીકલ રાઇટિંગ બહુ. આ તો લિટરેચર છે જ નહીં, લિટરેચર તો એમ લખાયું. પણ આપણે બુક લેવા જઈએ તો શું કરીએ? આપણા માઇન્ડ, તમારે કેવી બુક જોઈએ એવો આપણે પ્રશ્ન પૂછીએ. તો તમે એવી જગ્યાએ જાઓ જે થિયરીને તમે ફોલો કરો છો. એટલે પહેલા થિયરી આવી ગઈ, પછી લિટરેચર આવ્યું. આપણે ઊંધું કરવાનું છે. પહેલા લિટરેચરને લાવી અને પછી થિયરીની વાત કરવાની છે. ઓકે, so sometimes when you read, okay, you read any critics, you start thinking that કઈ ભાષામાં લખ્યું હતું. ઘણી વાર મારા ટીવાયના સ્ટુડન્ટ જે હતા, જેને હું ભણાવતો કે હું જ્યાં પણ જાઉં તો એ લોકો એમ જ કહે કે સાહેબ અંગ્રેજીમાં છે પણ હું લખ્યું એ સમજાતું નથી. કેમ નથી સમજાતું? બહુ અઘરું છે, કારણ કે આપણે થિયોરાઇઝ કરવામાં જતા રહીએ. આપણે થિયરી, આપણે લિટરેચરમાં તો રહ્યા જ નહીં. એ થિયરી પાછી કોકે લખી હોય એના ઉપર. તો તમારે ફૂકો સમજ હોય તો ઓરિજિનલ ફૂકો વાંચો. તમારે ક્રિસ્ટિયા, સ્પિવાક, ડેરિડા સમજ હોય તો એ લોકોને વાંચો. એના વિશે જેને કીધું એમ નહીં, કારણ કે એ તો પછી અલગ થિયરીમાં તમે જતા રહેશો. ઓકે, સો યુ સ્ટડી લિટરેચર, you study classic texts that are timeless, that are historic, and then you read what critics said about them. આ પ્રોસેસ હોય છે. આપણે ઊંધી છે. પેલા ક્રિટિકે શું કીધું, પછી હિસ્ટોરિકલ કોન્ટેક્ટ શું, અને પછી ટેક્સ્ટ શું. એવી રીતે નથી જતું. અને બીજી બાજુ શું થાય છે? You look into how it is written. That means examining language, gender politics ને જો, unconscious ને જો ટેક્સ્ટમાં, સ્ટાઇલિસ્ટિક્સ ને જો, સાયકોએનાલિસિસ ને જો, ફ્રોઇડ છે, માર્ક્સ છે અને જો, લતાને જો, દરિદાને જો, લિંગ્વિસ્ટિક્સ ને જો. આ બીજી રીત છે. પહેલી રીત શું છે? ક્લાસિક બુક છે, એને તમે જેવી છે એવી વાંચો. બીજી રીત શું છે? લેંગ્વેજ ઉપર જાઓ, જેન્ડર ઉપર જાઓ, જેન્ડર પોલિટિક્સ ઉપર જાઓ, અનકોન્શિયસ, સબકોન્શિયસ, સ્ટાઇલિસ્ટિક, સાયકોએનાલિસિસ, લતા. અઘરું થઈ જાય. જ્યાં જે એપ્લાય થતું હોય ત્યાં થાય. બધું પરાણે એપ્લાય ન થાય. પણ આપણે થિયરીમાં એટલા બધા ઘૂસી ગયા હોઈએ, અથવા આપણે એટલી બધી ઇમ્પોર્ટન્સ થિયરીને આપવાની, જે ઇમ્પોર્ટન્ટ છે, ઇમ્પોર્ટન્ટ ફિલ્ડ છે, પણ એ અલગ જ ફિલ્ડ છે. પણ એ ફિલ્ડ ને સીધું બધે અંદર આપણે પરાણે નાખી દેવાનું નથી. સો યુ થિંક યુ આર એન ઇન્ટેલેક્ચ્યુઅલ ઇનકમ્પ્લીટ. આપણને એવું લાગવા માંડે લકાને બધાને વાંચી આપણે તો આપણને કઈ આવડતું જ નથી. બધું આજુબાજુ આપણે દુનિયામાં એમ થાય કે આપણે તો સાવ અભણ થઈ ગયા. આટલું બધું આવતું હતું અત્યાર સુધી વાંચ્યું હતું કે આવતું ફૂકો વાંચો, ડેરિડા વાંચો, લકાન વાંચો ને તો ગ્રીક એન્ડ લેટિન માં થઈ જાય, ક્રિસ્તીવા વાંચો તો આપણને એવું લાગે કે કોઈ બીજી
સર
હેલો
સર મારો એક ક્વેશ્ચન છે.
ક્વેશ્ચન આપણે છેલ્લે લઈએ તો સાહેબ.
ઓકે સર ઓકે.
હા તમે નોટ ડાઉન કરી નાખજો. એટલે શું છે મારે પાછો લિંક નો પ્રોબ્લેમ છે. હું પાછો વચ્ચે કઈક ડાયગ્રેસ થઈ જાઉં બીજો જતો રહીશ. એટલે જે છે ને તમારો ક્વેશ્ચન નોટ ડાઉન કરી નાખો. આપણે બધા ક્વેશ્ચન ના આન્સર આપણે આપવાનો પૂરો પ્રયત્ન કરશું. So we were talking about yes, you start thinking that everything becomes Greek and Latin when you read all of a sudden Derrida's deconstruction. Then you start thinking, oh, what is this? I don't know English at all. Okay. So the basic question is, why are you saying what are you saying? That should be a question. તમે જે કહો છો એ શું કામ કહો છો? અને અમુક પરિસ્થિતિ એવી આવે આપણા જીવનમાં જયારે આપણે સાહિત્ય વાંચતા હોય અથવા થિયરી વાંચતા હોય કે થિયરી બહુ ફ્રસ્ટ્રેટિંગ થઈ જાય. ઓકે, આપણે હંમેશા થિયરીઝમાં એટલા બધા ધારો કે પોલિટિકલ સોશિયલ અવેરનેસ ઇન ટર્મ્સ ઓફ ઇનઇક્વાલિટી બહુ ઇમ્પોર્ટન્ટ હોય. રેસ શું છે, જેન્ડર શું છે, સેક્સ્યુઅલ ઓરિએન્ટેશન શું છે, ફિઝિકલ એબિલિટી શું છે, આ બધાને આપણે ઇન્ક્લુડ કરીએ જયારે આપણે વાંચીએ છીએ. પહેલેથી નથી કરવાનું હોય. પ્રોબ્લેમ ક્યાં છે? વી હેવ ટુ ડુ ઇટ આફ્ટરવર્ડ્સ, not as soon as we start reading. First of all, read, allow it to absorb you completely and then start questioning. You don't just start questioning from the first word you start reading. That is not the way in which you understand everything in literature. Okay, so why is the word here? એવો આપણે ઘણી વાર પ્રશ્ન પૂછીએ તો સ્ટાઇલિસ્ટિક એનાલિસિસ કરીએ તો why is the word here એટલે શું? ઇનડાયરેક્ટ ક્વેશ્ચન શું છે? what does the word do? આ વર્ડ શું કરે છે? why is the word here એટલે what does the word do? how does the word fit in there? how does it fictionalize things? what does it produce? what does it mean? આ બધું આપણે જોવાનું છે. okay, through our understanding of basic linguistics, basic language and basic humanistic interpretation of literature as we should do, not through somebody else's binocular. Okay, so what do you do after close reading? That is another question. Okay, what does the word image in the text do? કોઈ પણ word image આપણે word વાંચીએ એટલે image બને તો text માં શું કરે આપણે visualize કરીએ. Okay, what does it mean visualize કરીએ? Okay, so literature basically in modern times is doing something. Literature earlier was being something. આ ડિફરન્સ અત્યારે આવી ગયો છે. અત્યારે તમારે કંઈક કરવાનું છે, પહેલા શું હતું? હોવાનું હતું. ઓકે, so it has become a part of this larger world wherein technology, science, economics, business, everything is important. Self-containment in literature is જતું રહ્યું છે. Okay, you have to be a part of everything, and that is why modern theories came into literature, because you will have to somehow be in something, do something. Okay, you have to continuously be in action, progressive. Okay, so literary texts therefore produce the world that we live in, and literary theory becomes the tools of examination of the world that we live in. આટલું બહુ સિમ્પલ. લિટરરી ટેક્સ્ટ એટલે શું? આપણે જે વર્લ્ડ માં રહીએ છીએ પ્રોડ્યુસ કરે છે ને લિટરરી થિયરી એટલે શું? એ ટૂલ્સ નો ઉપયોગ કરે છે. પણ લિટરેચર વાત તો શેની કરે છે? કોર હ્યુમન વેલ્યુઝ ની, બેઝિક હ્યુમન વેલ્યુઝ ની. ઓકે, આપણે એવું કહીએ વોટ ઇઝ લિટરેચર? ધેન લિટરેચર ઇઝ અબાઉટ કોર હ્યુમન વેલ્યુઝ. એકદમ ક્લીશે આપણે વાત કરીએ તો ઇટ મેક્સ યુ બેટર પર્સન. Okay, so what do you make? That is the question in modern time. કારણ કે આપણે બિઝનેસ, ટેકનોલોજી, સાયન્સના યુગમાં છીએ એટલે તમને એવો સવાલ પૂછવા આવશે what do you make? અને what do you make should be a product, and that product should be tangible. તમે એમ કહો we enlighten તો કે એવું બધું નહીં. દેખાય enlightenment દેખાય તો તમે કહો ના તો એવું ન હાલે. enlightenment દેખાડો તો એ તો દેખાડવાનું હોય. It is not tangible. You don't produce anything at all when you study literature, and never do you study anything to produce anything. Okay, in humanities, in social sciences, production is not important, and enlightening you is very important. Okay, so literature is immeasurable. એને કોઈ મેજર ન હોય, ટેન્જિબિલિટી ન હોય કે કેટલી બિલીફ 10 બિલીફ તો આ બિલીફ 10 શીખે એવું ન હોય. આ થોડી સાયન્સ છે એવું નથી. But world is different now. It is economic, economically driven. Okay, so so you start thinking that literary theory, what does it do? તો આપણે મેક કરવું હોય તો આપણે શું બનાવીએ છીએ? નોલેજ બનાવીએ છીએ, એવું કહી શકીએ. હાઇપોથેટિકલ વાત કરી શકીએ કે હર્ષ એમ કીધું હતું કે ભાઈ it makes knowledge. Then what is knowledge? Who makes it? Who evaluates it? Who has it? Okay, for what? Why study literature? આવા બેઝિક ક્વેશ્ચન જે આપણે સતત ફેંકવામાં આવે, પણ આપણે શું છે, we don't produce anything tangible, અને એ વસ્તુ ઉપર આપણને થોડુંક જે છે, we should be proud that we are beyond everything tangible. Okay, we don't want to produce things which are materialistic in existence. We produce things that make us aware of how to use any particular material that is there in front of you. Okay, આ બધા ક્વેશ્ચન નો જવાબ લિટરરી થિયરી આપે. What does it mean? એનો સવાલ એ થિયરી આપે, જવાબ આપે થિયરી. How does it mean what does it produce? એનો જવાબ થિયરી આપે. What is its effect? એનો જવાબ થિયરી આપે. Okay, so theory શું કરે? It eliminates the basic assumptions about the world that we live in. Okay, એટલે આને વર્લ્ડ થિયરી નો ભાગ કહેવાય. તો વર્લ્ડ થિયરી માંથી લિટરરી થિયરી આવે છે. Okay, so you start exploring meaning on how the world works. આ તમે એક્સપ્લોર કરો છો, થિયરી ની વાત કરો તમે શું કરો છો? How the world works in the world that is created in the book by a particular author. કારણ કે એમાં એક પેરેલલ વર્લ્ડ ચાલુ છે. ઓકે, to enter a world view, એટલે તમારી પાસે છે ને માઇક્રોસ્કોપિક એનાલિસિસ વર્લ્ડ નું કરી શકો, લિટરરી થિયરી હોય તો. It develops a way of thinking. Okay, એટલે આપણે શેમાં જતા રહ્યા? You go into the mechanics of everything. Okay, why the world works in the way in which it does? આવો ક્વેશ્ચન આપણે પૂછીએ તો આનો જવાબ લિટરરી થિયરી કદાચ આપી શકે. તો આપણી માટે વર્લ્ડ છે શું થયું? એ ટેક્સ્ટ થઈ. એટલે મિકેનિક્સ ઇમ્પોર્ટન્ટ છે, પણ મિકેનિક્સ એ મેજિક નો ચામ જતો ન કરવો જોઈએ. આપણે મૂવીઝ ઘણી વાર જોઈએ તો મૂવીમાં આપણે કોઈ હીરો હોય એને હીરોના ફોર્મમાં જ જોઈએ છે. આપણા મનમાં એવી ખબર છે કે એક્ટિંગ કરે છે તોય, તો આપણને ખબર છે કે આ બધું ફિક્શન છે, છતાં આપણે એમાં ઇમર્સ થઈને જોઈએ છે. તો લિટરેચર એવું છે, એવું છે, એમાં ઇમર્સ થવું પડે. એનો ટૂલ લિટરરી થિયરી છે, ઇમર્સ થવાનો. ડિટેચ થવાનો નહીં, આપણે દૂર જઈને લિટરેચર ને જોવા માંડીએ. તમે ઇમર્સ થાવ, તમારો ફર્સ્ટ સ્ટેપ અંદર જવાનું છે. ઓકે, તમે કોઈ મોટો સીન, બહુ સીન જુઓ, યુ સી બાહુબલી ફોર એક્ઝામ્પલ. બાહુબલી so extravagant. Okay, or you see any Hollywood historic movie extravagant છે, તો એ શું છે? આપણે જયારે જોવા બેસીએ ત્યારે ખબર છે આ બધું ખોટું જ છે, આવું છે જ નહીં, છતાં આપણને વર્લ્ડ ગમે. Because we are connected to a larger art form and not how it is made. તો આપણે how it is made માંથી બહાર નીકળી અને એક larger art form ઉપર ફોકસ કરવાનું છે. So this is how you consider literary theory as only an aid of literature and not vice versa. Literature is not an aid of literary theory, but literary theory is an aid of literature. And all the theories that are going on right now are mere theories. They are not literary theories. Okay, so this is my understanding of literary theory. Now everybody can come in. We should discuss some ideas and move forward. I need to listen to all of you with regard to how you interpret what I said and what are your thoughts upon it. So questions are more than welcome now. Hello? Hello? Everybody is free to ask questions if there are any.
If you
Yes. Hello? Hello?
Yes, sir. Yes.
Please.
Hello. Can you
Please.
listen, Mr.?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Teaching literary theory,
Yes.
it becomes difficult.
Yes.
I think teaching should not be the way, but any other way that you can suggest. I have in my mind is discussion, but any other way.
Uh, See, what I believe is literary theory has to be first of all dealt with as a specialized field which is not in uh, relation to literature at all. First of all. Now, when you discuss any literary theory, you should first of all let them know about the basic premise of why it is written and was it written in order to make it applicable to literature, and the answer to it most of the times is no. So when you wish to immerse any particular person into literary theory and make it more simpler, the only way to do that is allow them to read the literary theories in original, come out with their own interpretation, and then perhaps discuss. Because then and then there would be a common platform where you would be getting in terms of getting viewpoints of the person who is listening to you and the person who has interpreted any particular text. Nowadays, what happens is if I come to your classroom, for example, to teach any particular literary theory, I would start marking about that theory from what I have read through internet on through various books because everybody has internet, everybody has books. You are not needed. Why are you needed? You are needed in order to make them more aware about what they are already aware about. Okay, I should not be using words which are extremely jargonic and confuse learners because they are already confused with regard to first of all why are they studying એ તો બધા ક્વેશ્ચન પૂછે એટલે એક કન્ફ્યુઝન છે બીજું આજે ભણ્યા છે આટલું અઘરું છે તો કઈ ખબર અઘરું ભણ્યા પછી શું બીજો ક્વેશ્ચન છે એટલે આમાં તમારે ઇમર્સ કરવા માટે એમને એન્જોય કરાવવું પડે કે લેક્ચરની થિયરી જે લખાઈ પહેલા તો થિયરી જે લખાઈ એ થિયરી લખાવા પાછળના કારણ સોશિયલ સાયન્સીસમાં છે અને લિટરેચરમાં નથી તો લિટરેચરને આપણે કારણ વગર આટલું ભારે કરવાની જરૂર નથી લિટરેચરને આપણે એબ્ઝોર્બ કરવાની જરૂર છે ઓકે this is how you can perhaps try to teach.
Thank you, sir. Any other person having question? Whether he Maulik, Rohit.
Hello. Sir, can you hear me?
Sir, we have one question.
Yes.
Yes, whether you speak.
Sir, I don't have any question, but I wanted to share some observation. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Sir, you said constant questioning is not good without grounding. Many times it is observed, like we in our university we have this for constant evaluation we have this presentation and assignments, for example.
Yes.
So many times I see that students are taking topic like just to prove the theory whatever they are studying for criticism. So it is observed that rather than reading the text or choosing topic what they like, because this particular thing like presentation and assignment are for their freedom, how they are using this freedom for creativity. Even many times even PhD students, those who want to pursue PhD, many times they ask me that please tell us some of the topic and which theory we can apply. So questioning has become a kind of a trend that okay, you are using deconstruction, you are using structuralism, but you are not reading the text. You want to do it because it is very trendy. So many times in Facebook post also I see that people do write movie review and everything, but many a times it feels like that you are watching a movie just because you want to apply a theory and then you want to write it on, rather than understanding. So somewhere this understanding is lacking. That is what
Yes,
I
yes.
feel.
I absolutely am on the same page as you are, madam. What I would like to add is uh, that, when you, for example, inform students to prepare a presentation or write a blog, uh, what we can do, as you said, it is a very in thing to think about literary theories and write on the title of the blog that deconstructing so and so. So when such thing is written, everybody actually starts thinking that that person is an intellectual, but that person has not at all read the text, okay, or that person has not even read deconstruction for that matter. So નથી deconstruction વાંચ્યું, નથી text વાંચી અને છતાં એના ઉપર લખે છે. And you are very right when you say this reviews that are written of any particular movie or any particular book, just for the sake of writing review, because you want to be in there. That is the problem with the modern society of learners, is that you always want yourself to be heard. But my belief simply is that unless and until you have something very concrete to tell, don't tell. Okay? And especially don't tell it to people who are just reading it because they also want to be there as they were there. Like you have these photographs, I was there in Facebook, or I'm here. Okay? So when somebody writes a particular blog, I'm amazed. Or when you send stories, because I'm not into Facebook, but for example, if I send a story in a particular group, so in 30 seconds there is this some impression or there is wow, but that story needs 5 minutes to be read. So how did you read that story in 30 seconds and say wow? Because you want to be a part of the larger narrative of so-called intellectuals, wherein if you appreciate something that is written by something, it becomes good enough. Okay, so that is the problem. So you are very right, madam. I'm on the same page. Thank you for your observation.
And exactly, sir, like feminism
Yes.
is like, I think, overused term when
Absolutely.
we look at people doing PhD. So one of the viva, I think Alpa might remember this, one of the viva we attended, that was the topic was about feminism, but the candidate literally didn't know anything about what is feminism, like what the
Right.
theory mean, what are the basics of theory, but just it is kind of good for style. The theory
Yes,
is
yes.
being taken.
So, yes, to make sure that you are heard, you start using
Yes.
such isms so that you all of a sudden become important. And so as I told you earlier in this lecture, madam, that we always strive to become difficult because we believe becoming difficult is actually being intellectual. Okay. So that is where the problem lies. You don't have to necessarily be difficult in order to prove yourself to be intellectual. Furthermore, you don't have to prove at all that you are an intellectual by using such terms and isms and, for example, as I said, somebody might not have read Spivak on gender politics and they quote Gayatri Spivak, or they might not know who is Lacan and they start writing about Lacan. So this is a problem that theory faces. Yeah. Thank you, madam.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks. Yeah. Anybody else?
Sir,
Yes.
I want to add something in this one line.
Yes.
We can say the age of social media. Can you hear me, sir?
Yes, I can now.
We can say that in the age of social media, we are creating pseudo culture.
Yes. See, I'll go a bit backward on that. The problem with people, I'm sorry if I say this, in literature, or the problem is with people who are teaching literature here. Okay, I'm not against anybody, but what I strongly believe is that You don't teach, interpret, analyze, evaluate, perspectivize literature to prove anything. Okay? So when a teacher comes in the classroom, I always see that teacher coming in the classroom to prove something. So you don't go in a classroom of literature to prove something. It is not a science classroom. You go in the classroom, you see your learners, you have a particular topic, you immerse yourself with those learners in trying to come up with a new perspective or a new meaning on what you're trying to say. So you are on the same boat as your learners are. But the problem with, as you said, pseudo-intellectuals in our field is that they are driving far ahead and they want always to be ahead of others, because if they are not ahead of others, they start believing that suddenly their importance would go down. Okay? So you don't try to merge into learners, because you yourself are a learner when you are talking about something. I learn a lot of things from you. For example, I learned a couple of things right now from madam and from you also. I get a new vision also. So you'll have to be first of all equal to your learners. Don't term them as students. They are your learners. And by being equal, I don't mean that you stoop to the level of their understanding. You try to bring them up. You elevate them by holding the hands and not frightening them about what. So first, when somebody comes in the classroom, I always seen that they start telling, so, okay, this is deconstruction. It is damn difficult. You'll have to put your minds totally into this, or else you'll not be able to understand this, because this is how everything works. And suddenly you have this barrier of, oh, it is difficult, how would I understand? Instead, you make a classroom a more of a seminar hall wherein you are putting your thoughts and students are picking your thoughts one by one, step by step. That is when this problem of pseudo-intellectualism, and with social media, as you said, social media is a crime, according to me. Everybody who writes absolute nonsense in social media should be held criminals, and should be thrown in jail, for example. Because sometimes what my friends say, that people write this on this and this on this, and I'm alarmed at how such a routine thing you can write. ઓકે ઘણી વાર હું રિવ્યુઝ વાંચું તો રિવ્યુઝ એટલા રૂટીન હોય કે એમાં કઈ કહેવાની જરૂર નથી. તમારી પાસે કઈ એક્સ્ટ્રાઓર્ડિનરી ન હોય તો ન કહો. અને બધી વસ્તુનો રિવ્યુ કરવો એ જરૂરી નથી ભાઈ, કારણ કે બધાની પાસે પોતાની સમજણ શક્તિ છે. આ તમારા પર્સપેક્ટિવ આપો તો રિવ્યુ તમે કેવો કરો કે એમને એક નવું એંગલ ખોલી નાખો, નહીં કે જે છે કયો. આપણે અત્યારે રિવ્યુઝ વાંચીએ જોઈએ તો શું છે, આવું છે આવું છે આવું છે, અદભુત છે, એવું ન હોય. તમારે એક નવું પર્સપેક્ટિવ ઉભા કરવામાં જે રિવ્યુ વાંચનાર છે એની મદદ કરવી પડે ને. તો સોશિયલ મીડિયા તો બહુ ક્રિમિનલ છે. એને લિટરેચર ને અને એસ્થેટિક્સ ને એટલું બધું ડિમીન કરી નાખ્યું છે અત્યારે કે there is no એની કોઈ સીમા જ નથી. there is no limit to absolute nonsense that sometimes social media throws up to you. I'm sorry to say this. Yes, anybody else with an observation is also welcome.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello.
Yes.
Hello. It's Maulik, and sir,
Yes,
your lecture is amazing. So I want to ask about literary theory and so how drama can be evaluated by literary theory. So drama, film, performances of different entertainment industries. So how this literary theory can to evaluate performances, or
okay.
Another question is it to evaluate the performances through literary theory? So what is your opinion? I don't know.
Okay, fine. So let's come to the first question first of all. That is, how do we evaluate drama through literary theories? My take on this would be very simple. that first of all, when you watch drama, you don't watch drama because that drama has to be applicable to something. Okay, so that perspective has to first of all get deleted. Now, for example, I am reading a particular drama, but drama should not be read, as I always say. If you are seeing a performance of any particular drama, and you start believing that, okay, psychoanalysis is applicable to this midway, that means your mind is overpowered by theory or literary theory that you have come across and that you are fascinated with. Okay. So first of all, go through the drama. What does the drama have to say according to you becomes important. You write that down. Now that what you have written down, does it reflect in any of the theories that you might have read? If the answer is yes, then you pick up that theory and try adding different characteristics to different characters. That is to your second question also. If a particular character has to be put on a furnace of any particular theory, first of all you need to make sure that character that you saw is the character that you lived also. Okay? Then your perspective, if accidentally matches with the perspective of any literary theory or theory, you start exploring it further. You don't start exploring it by putting your pen down on, okay, this particular character is going through this crisis and I would be like, no, that is not the way. You first of all let yourself into the drama, because when you watch a drama, you are a character also. Okay, I strongly believe that when I watch a movie, I become a particular character who is sitting around those characters. So I start feeling their emotions, and when I start feeling their emotions, I try to analyze, okay, this person is actually behaving in this particular manner because of such social, cultural circumstance. જે theory ની આપણે આગળ વાત કરી હતી. So those circumstances, if accidentally match, then you start exploring it further. But you don't do it prior to getting into any drama. So, for example, if you watch any drama that is postmodern, say, okay, so don't watch that drama as postmodern. Watch that drama as drama. Now, do you think it is really postmodern? If you think yes, it is postmodern, then what are the points that you jot down? Now, do those points that you jot down match the points that postmodernism has to say? If the answer is yes, okay. If you apply the concept of psychoanalysis also to a particular character, then does your mind permit you to psychoanalyze? That is the first question that you need to ask. Not I will psychoanalyze. So this is how you can perhaps look at drama in this context, and I'm sure if you look at any drama, any movie, any work like this, you will be denser in terms of your practical understanding of every particular character. Don't have this pressure of explaining when you review. The problem is that you start feeling the pressure of explaining. Instead, you should start feeling what you are talking. So when you start feeling, then there is no need of explanation, because your feeling will directly translate to the feelings of the readers who are reading you or the listeners who are listening to you. I hope I have made myself clear on this, Maulik. Hello?
Yes, hello, sir. Hello.
Yes, I hope it was some use to you.
Yeah, sir. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. But still,
yes.
I have another doubt. Sir,
Yes.
is it appropriate to evaluate performance through this literary theory?
Sorry, is it?
Sir, is it appropriate?
Acha, appropriate. Uh,
Huh.
uh,
Yes, yes.
appropriateness in
A
literature.
performance to, yes, yes.
Yes, yes.
A performance.
So you know the
Hmm.
yes. So you know the
Hmm.
basic concept of appropriateness in any performance or any form of art cannot be generalized. Okay. If I find something to be appropriate of worth construct, for example, if you have seen Aakho Dekhi is based on deconstruction, but you should later on come to know about that central character who starts questioning everything, and then you start believing that okay, he is actually deconstructing the basic idea of how this world has come into existence. So there you are trying to analyze any particular character through a literary theory. And please believe this, any theory when applied to literature becomes literary theory or else it is a mere theory. So through theory, yes, but appropriateness as a question becomes a very individualistic. So to me, you can apply any theory to any particular character, but if you yourself, without any cobwebs of any theory that you have read, start believing, or else you don't do that. Okay. So when you read, when you watch, when you analyze any character, one thing that every one of you should do is you should make yourself free from everything that you know. Okay. Otherwise, what would happen is you stop enjoying the process of art, and you will be burdened with how would I be dealing with after this gets over. So you rather enjoy it, and then if it is appropriate, you apply it. If it is not, fine, not an issue.
Oh, oh. So it's difficult to eradicate your knowledge when you're watching
Absolutely.
something. It's too
So you
difficult.
are not,
Yeah.
yes. So the problem is not
Hmm.
eradicating. You don't have to erase it. See, but you will have to keep it in a different compartment altogether. It is very difficult. I understand that. But then, why are you watching what you are watching? That should be the first question that you should ask. For example, I pick up any particular movie. Okay. So why I am picking up any particular movie? Because I want to analyze. If the question that first of all strikes your mind is analysis, you will never be able to do it. But if you say that I want to enjoy this, then you might perhaps be able to keep that aside for some time and then bring it back with all the difficulties that you might have while you watch something. But that has to be done in order to be objective in your subjective analysis, because ultimately you are subjective, but in subjectivity you also have to be objective in what you are looking at, because your viewpoint should not be applicable everywhere, or any theory is not basically applicable everywhere, as you said. And you questioned it very correctly, that do we need to or should we apply theory to a character? So my answer to it still remains the same. Don't watch, don't read anything for the cause of application. And what you said, it is very difficult simply because you are taught like that. Okay, so the problem is your orientation. You are always told that you should hold a binocular if you see something. If I watch a movie, for example, if I watch a wonderful comedy movie, if I was watching Fukre Part 2 day before yesterday. Okay, now I am a person of literature, so should I be groping with characteristics in Fukre? Fukre is related to this modern question of how do you exist in this world which is full of problems. Now, what that person who has dreams, Chucha, is doing is magic realism. But does magic realism uh, apply in Fukre's premise? The answer to it is no. Okay, so is the premise worth of applying? I just enjoyed, and I don't have to necessarily examine everything that I watched through the binocular that I have. Okay, so that has to be developed, I believe, Maulik. You have to develop that way of looking at things.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
thanks. Anybody else?
Rohit, if you want to ask.
Sir, there are a lot many questions we have to ask to ourselves before reading or taking any literature in hand.
Yes,
So, as you have suggested, we have to ask very simple questions that why am I reading this? That what are the reasons that I am getting this book in my hand? So, though these questions are very simple, that what are the difficulties a person is facing to get the answers, and the process of thinking is taking very hegemonically, and it is and time and again it becomes very difficult to get the answers, even if the questions are very simple.
yes. But as I told you, okay, the problem is that simple things to us are so less important because we believe that simplicity should not be there in whatever we do. આ પ્રોબ્લેમ છે ભાઈ આપણો રોહિત સર કે
Okay.
જે સિમ્પ્લિસિટી નો કોન્સેપ્ટ જે છે ને એ આપણને બહુ ડાઉન માર્કેટ લાગવા માંડ્યો છે અને આપણે એવું બિલીવ કરવા માંડ્યા છે કે if something is not difficult, it is of no use. So that should not be the case. Okay, anything that is difficult has to be made simple by your own interpretation. You don't have to make things even more difficult. જો તમને એક્ઝામ્પલ આપું, જ્યારે તમે કોઈ વસ્તુ ઇન્ટરપ્રેટ કરો, ધારો કે તમે કોઈ ટેક્સ્ટ લીધી ને તમે ઇન્ટરપ્રેટ કરો, તેમાં 3 ભાગ આવે બેઝિકલી. એક પહેલું તમે રિકોગ્નિશન કરો, recognitive strategy of interpretation, wherein there is concept of history and literariness combined. So you recognize. Then there is presentational concept. Okay, so for example any dramatic way of doing things or musical a presentation કહેવાય. અને ત્રીજું જે છે normative way of doing things, that is how far it is legal or how far it is religious. એટલે નરેટિવ સ્ટ્રેટેજી તો આ 3 રીતે તમે ઇન્ટરપ્રિટ કરો. હવે તમે જે ઇન્ટરપ્રિટેશન ને સિમ્પલી કરો છો એનો અર્થ એવો નથી કે વસ્તુ નકામી થઈ ગઈ. આ તમારા મગજમાંથી દરેક સ્ટુડન્ટે કાઢી નાખવાનું હોય કે if you understand something very easily, that does not mean that you have misunderstood. Okay, are you getting my point? Sometimes what happens is you take a particular book in your hand, you take up a particular theory, you read 4 pages and you start believing that okay, I understand this, but people around you are not understanding, so you start doubting your own intellectualism by thinking that આને સમજાતું યાર મને કેમ સમજાઈ ગયું, મારામાં કંઈક ભૂલ છે. એટલે આ જે કોમ્પ્લેક્સ થી આપણે પીડાઈએ છે ને કોમ્પ્લેક્સ પેલા આપણે બહાર કાઢી નાખવો પડશે. યુ નો ધીસ મેં તમને EM હર્ષની જે વાત કરી HIRSHE, એની એક બહુ સરસ બુક છે વેલિડિટી ઓફ ઇન્ટરપ્રિટેશન. એ બુક તમે વાંચજો. ઓકે, જેમાં ફિનોમિનોલોજીની વાત કરે છે, ઓકે, તમારી બિલીફ સિસ્ટમની વાત કરે છે, ડાયરેક્ટ એક્સપિરિયન્સની વાત કરે છે. વેલિડિટી ઓફ ઇન્ટરપ્રિટેશન બાય EM ED હર્ષ. ઓકે, you have to go through it in order to so you first of all have to be confident enough that what you are saying is making some sense, but that confidence comes out of proper structured simple reading, not complex reading. આપણો જે પ્રોબ્લેમ છે ને કે આપણે કોમ્પ્લેક્સ રીડિંગ બહુ ગમે અને કોઈ માણસ કોમ્પ્લેક્સ વાત કરે તો એ આપણને બહુ ગમે અને કોઈ માણસ તમને સિમ્પલ વાત કરતો હોય આપણને એમ થાય કે યાર આ તો સમજે આવે, આ તો વાત કરે છે, પણ એને જે તમને વાત મૂકી એટલી જ કોમ્પ્લેક્સ વાત હતી જેને સિમ્પલ વેમાં મૂકી. So that is how you should perhaps start reading any particular text.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Anyone else?
Sir, can you listen me?
Yes,
my question is little bit long. There is one dialogue in one movie that I read to you. Medicine, law, business, engineering, these are noble pursuits and necessary to sustain life. But poetry, beauty, romance, love, these are what we stay alive for.
Yes.
Okay. And my question is that poetry and which are not for mass but for class. So how can we convince or how can we defend ourselves to the non-literature people who ask that science is giving something tangible things, not the literature. So how we can explain them, because they are not for understanding this line also, the second line, but
Yeah.
poetry, beauty, love. Yes.
Yeah. So first of all, let me make this point very clear. That you don't have to convince people. That is the first one. But your question is also valid. They keep on asking questions, and sometimes when people don't understand what you are trying to say, that means there is some problem in their thinking pattern, which has become so socio-economically business-minded that they are not into larger emotive things in your life. And I'll give you a simple example. You eradicate poetry, you eradicate drama, you eradicated all art from the world right now. આ COVID-19 માં તમે જુઓ છો ને, છેલ્લા 40 દિવસથી આપણે આમાં રહીએ છીએ. બધા આર્ટ કાઢી નાખો જોઈએ. જેટલો આર્ટ છે આખા વિશ્વમાં એ કાઢી નાખો અને પછી તમે વિશ્વની કલ્પના કરો જોઈએ. તેનો જવાબ એમાં છે. બીજું કે તમે ટેકનોલોજીનો જે ઉપયોગ કરો છો એ કરો છો તો અત્યારે આર્ટ માટે, સમજાય છે? તો ટેકનોલોજી તો તમારો ટૂલ થયું છે, લિટરરી થિયરી ટૂલ છે. For example, if you are watching a movie on a mobile phone is a product of technology, but what you are watching in that is art. What you are reading in that is art. What you read in e-books, art. So technology or anything that is related to tangibility is to support art. Are you getting my point? They support you. So support system is always secondary. It is never primary. કોઈ supporting actor હોય તો એનું નામ પછી જ આવે. મેઇન એક્ટર હોય એનું નામ જ પહેલા આવે મૂવી જોવા જાવ તો. બરાબર છે? તો એ તમારો એટીટ્યુડ એક હોવો જોઈએ કે અને સાયન્સ ક્યાં સુધી? ચલો સાયન્સ છે, ટેકનોલોજી છે, કોમર્સ, આપણે કોઈ વસ્તુને ખરાબ જેવું નહીં. આપણે અત્યારે બધી સુવિધાઓ જે લઈએ છીએ સાયન્સ ટેકનોલોજીથી જ લઈએ છીએ. પણ એનો અંત ક્યારેક તો આવશે ને. અત્યારે તમારે એવી કોઈ વસ્તુની જરૂર છે કે હવે સાયન્સ બહાર પાડે એના વગર નહીં હાલે, એવું કઈ છે જ નહીં. તો સાયન્સે એનું કામ કરી લીધું છે. હવે તમારે એ બધાનો ઉપયોગ તમે શેમાં કરો છો? તમારા એસ્થેટિક પ્લેઝર માટે, અન્ડરસ્ટેન્ડિંગ ડીપર. હંમેશા ડીપ વસ્તુ હોય ને, ડીપ ત્યાં બહુ પહોંચે નહીં લોકો. ઓકે, એટલે તમને જે બધા સવાલો પૂછે છે ને, ડેપ્થમાં જવામાં રસવાળા લોકો નથી. ઓકે, તો ડેપ્થમાં જે જાય ને એના પાસે કોઈ સવાલ ન હોય, પછી પૂછે જ નહીં, કારણ કે એટલો ડેપ્થમાં જતો રહ્યો હોય. એટલે એ લોકોના ક્વેશ્ચનના આન્સર આપવા જરૂરી નથી, પણ એનો આન્સર એક પ્રેક્ટિકલ અત્યારની પરિસ્થિતિ જ છે કે તમને જે સવાલ લોકો પૂછે છે ને એ બધાને તમે પૂછો કે આ લોકડાઉન સમયે તમે કઈ કઈ વસ્તુ આખા દિવસમાં કરો છો, અને એમાંથી 90% વસ્તુઓ તો આર્ટ્સની જ આવશે. તો આ એનો આન્સર છે. બરાબર?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes.
If anyone has questions or comments. Kavisha, Ruchi.
So no questions right now?
No, sir. No questions now.
Shall we end this session?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Thank you for listening to me, all of you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Bye.